On the day Andrew was officially recognized as a legitimate member of the family, I personally came to offer my congratulations, just as I had in my previous life. This time, I brought along 6 strong bodyguards. His entire family warmly held my hands, acting as if I were their most cherished daughter. "Let me introduce her to everyone." His father, Mr. Carter, said with a beaming smile. "This is Emily Lynn, the heiress of the Lynn Corporation." His mother immediately added, "And she's also going to be the future daughter-in-law of the Carter family." Even his sister-in-law, Joanna, gave me a sweet smile and said, "You're here. Our whole family is so happy to see you." In my previous life, they had treated me exactly the same way, surrounding me with sweet words and clever traps, making me believe Andrew's indifference toward me was simply because he was introverted and overly sensitive. I thought his coldness stemmed from pride, and I was determined to win him over, even if it meant enduring scolding from my family elders. I spared no effort, using every resource at my disposal to help him succeed. Andrew never refused my help, but years later, when my family faced a major crisis, not only did he refuse to assist us, but he also joined hands with our competitors to destroy us. I will never forget the day he came to acquire my family's company. My father, barely holding on, finalized all the paperwork and suffered a fatal heart attack in the elevator on his way out. As I held my father's lifeless body in despair, the elevator doors opened to reveal Andrew, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He looked down at me coldly and said, "Miss Emily, your support has fallen. Now, do you want to be my wife or a ruined woman? The choice is yours." That moment felt like a bolt of lightning had struck me. I couldn't believe the ruthless, unfeeling man standing before me was the same boy who once showed me his vulnerable and helpless side. When I rejected him, he retaliated by pressuring my creditors to harass me, leaving me with no peace until I had no choice but to beg him for mercy. We were married for 8 years. During that time, Andrew never touched me, no matter how much effort I put into caring for the household or trying to prove my worth. One of the rooms in our home was dedicated entirely to a shrine for his first love, Sarah. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., he would insist that I light incense for her. Afterward, he would stay in the room alone for a while. I secretly eavesdropped a few times and heard him say things like, "Sarah, he deserves to grovel like a dog. If only you were still alive, we wouldn't have to torment each other like this. We would have been the happiest couple." I never understood what I had done wrong. Every time I tried to uncover the truth, his entire family would unite against me, accusing me of being a villain, blaming me for Sarah's death, and calling me an unrepentant sinner. But I genuinely didn't know what had happened. On the day Sarah jumped into the sea, I was busy organizing Andrew's birthday party. I didn't even see the message she sent me, "Wishing you happiness," until after the party ended. That was the first and only time she had contacted me directly. Yet after her death, that message became the evidence of my alleged guilt. On our 8th wedding anniversary, Andrew asked me to drive him and Sarah's memorial tablet to a remote temple for a blessing. We had a car accident on the mountain road. I was trapped in the driver's seat, unable to move or call for help. Andrew, sitting in the back, wasn't as seriously injured, but he deliberately delayed rescuing me. He stood there and watched as the car caught fire. Moments before the explosion, I screamed at him in despair, asking what Sarah's death had to do with me. He looked at me coldly and said, "In your next life, be a better person." But there is no next life. Today is the 2nd day since I've been reborn. My gaze swept past all the charming faces in the room and landed on Andrew, who was hiding at the back, pretending to be aloof. Hatred surged through me, and the pain of my past life washed over me again. "Andrew, congratulations," I said with a sharp smile. "You've officially been recognized. The Carter family has finally accepted their illegitimate son." The atmosphere froze. His cunning father had only managed to secure his place in the Carter family by using me as leverage, claiming that Andrew and I had been college classmates and that I had pursued him passionately. That was the only reason he had the courage to confront his wife and force a reconciliation. Andrew's face turned crimson with embarrassment, his usually elegant features twisting as the color deepened. The lively atmosphere disappeared, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Mrs. Carter gave Joanna a subtle glance, Joanna immediately lowered her voice and asked, Emily, did you and my brother have a fight? I pulled my hand away from her grasp. In my previous life, before I married Andrew, I had always thought Joanna was a kind and simple girl. She didn't show hostility toward the sudden appearance of a half-brother. Instead, she seemed eager to get along with him. But later, I realized she was a master manipulator, even better at scheming than her mother. On the surface, she wished for me and Andrew to be happy together. But behind the scenes, she feared that with my family's support, Andrew would secure the inheritance rights to the company. She constantly schemed against us. After my family collapsed, she was the first person to kick me while I was down. Even after Andrew and I got married, she was the most frequent visitor to our home, always looking for ways to sow discord. Don't call me sister-in-law. You can't afford to ruin my reputation. I brushed past Joanna and walked straight toward Andrew. He stood tall, more than a head higher than me, with deep, unreadable eyes and lashes so thick they cast shadows on his face. He always had that brooding look, as if hiding secrets too heavy for anyone to uncover. They all say I'm your girlfriend, I said, tilting my head slightly. I'm a little busy, so tell me, am I? In my previous life, this point in time, Andrew always kept our relationship ambiguous. He neither accepted nor rejected me outright. It wasn't until I handed him a $30 million project to secure his foothold in the city that he finally admitted I was his girlfriend. Andrew glanced sideways, looking left and right as if searching for something or someone. Then, with a faint, almost indifferent tone, he countered, What do you think? I understood immediately. Someone in this room cared about his answer more than I did. Was it Sarah? I didn't see her anywhere. Hiding in some corner. Perhaps? So, is it a yes or no? I pressed, my voice sharp. Be straightforward. Joanna rushed over, laughing awkwardly to defuse the tension. Oh, Andrew, don't be so shy. Emily wants to hear you say it loud and clear. Come on. Don't be like a block of wood. Mrs. Carter, Andrew's stepmother, also joined in with a smile, encouraging him to answer. After a long silence, Andrew finally spoke. His gaze met mine, and there was a flicker of resentment in his eyes. Yes, you're my girlfriend. I clapped my hands together in mock surprise. Oh my, I knew there was a misunderstanding. I don't like you and never wanted to be your girlfriend. The entire Carter family turned to look at me, their expressions synchronized with confusion, then turned back to Andrew, their faces mirroring the same disbelief. You're all crooked from the top down, I said, shaking my head. Don't mention my name again. It's filthy. I strode over to Mrs. Carter, giving her a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Your husband's illegitimate son is older than your daughter. That must sting. Be careful. One day the father and son might join forces to set you up. With that, I turned and left the room, flanked by my bodyguards, walking out of the hall with my head held high. Just as I was about to leave the estate entirely, a girl dressed incongruously for the occasion ran after me, spreading her thin arms to block my path. She was trembling from head to toe, clearly terrified. I want you to apologize to Andrew, she stammered, her voice shaking. It was Sarah. I scrutinized her for a few seconds and then asked, testing her resolve, Do you think this is touching? She lifted her chin stubbornly, tears welling in her eyes, and stared at me without responding. I sighed, exasperated. Why should I apologize? Give me a reason. No one can choose their origins, she replied, her voice trembling but determined. You insulted him because of his background. That's your fault. You owe him an apology. Ridiculous. I looked past her at the guests who had started to gather behind me, then fixed her with a cold glare. He couldn't choose his origins. Sure. But does that mean he can't die? The moment those words left my mouth, the expressions of everyone around me shifted drastically. Only Mrs. Carter and her daughter revealed a glimmer of satisfaction in their eyes. How can you be so cruel? Sarah asked through tears, her voice trembling with emotion. Andrew rushed over to her in just a few quick steps, his eyes filled with a hint of pity. Sarah, stop it. Someone like her could never have empathy. I laughed coldly. Andrew, your very existence is an insult to the rightful wife. If you truly had any empathy, you wouldn't have gone through with this whole family reunion charade. Remember this. Every time I see you, I'll make sure to humiliate you." With a wave of my hand, I signaled my bodyguards to push the two of them aside. I walked a few steps away but suddenly stopped, as if remembering something. Turning back, I smiled mockingly at Joanna. "Don't worry, Joanna. You're the legitimate daughter. If you ever run into trouble, you can always come to me for help." Hearing her name, Joanna froze and instinctively glanced at her father before lowering her head slowly. Her mother responded on her behalf. "Emily, I know Andrew must have done something to upset you. I'll scold him for it later. Please don't be angry anymore." "Okay." Sarah cast a worried glance at Andrew, then lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Andrew seemed to take her reaction as a cue. He stepped closer to me, lowered his gaze, and muttered, "So I didn't respond to your messages for 2 days. Fine. I'm sorry. Can you stop making a scene?" He had never been prompt in replying to my messages. In my previous life, I had grown so used to it that I didn't even mind anymore. I had told myself it was because he had a difficult life and an introverted personality. I thought if I gave more and sacrificed more, it would eventually break down his walls and soften his sharp edges. But all it did was trap me in a toxic cycle, leaving me obsessed with fixing him. "If you're truly sorry," I said calmly, "then kneel and say it." Andrew let out a cold laugh, his voice low and bitter. "I knew you've always looked down on me. Are you done playing games? So, get lost. Get out of here. Is that your limit? What if I called you a little bastard?" Andrew lunged at me, his face contorted with anger. But my bodyguard stepped in and restrained him just in time. Unbothered, I adjusted my coat and strolled away. The Lin family, a prestigious lineage with a 100-year history, had fallen because of internal decay, rats eating away at its core. Meanwhile, Andrew's Carter family was nothing more than a nouveau riche clan that had ridden the wave of a favorable era. In my previous life, I had been blinded by foolish sentiment, giving them the chance to leech off my family's resources. Now that I've returned, everything starts anew. My priority is to prevent the Lin family's decline. And as for Andrew, my revenge will be swift and surgical, using the tools at my disposal. After leaving the Carter estate, I got into my car and began reviewing the video recordings my bodyguards had captured. "Miss Lin, they've arrived," my bodyguard in the passenger seat said. I glanced out the window and saw 2 full buses parked not far away. From them emerged a bustling crowd of Andrew's relatives on his mother's side, all smiling brightly as they made their way toward the Carter family's gated community. The sight startled the security guards, who spun in circles nervously before finally remembering to call for backup on their walkie-talkies. It's a pity Andrew's mother had been sent overseas. Otherwise, this would have been even more entertaining. I allowed myself a moment of regret. A few cars parked along the road had reporters inside who couldn't resist the spectacle. Camera lenses began to poke out of the windows, capturing the scene. The sunny weather was perfect for photos. With all this material, I'd make sure to spread the news far and wide, both online and offline. Andrew's mother's extended family, old neighbors, and acquaintances would surely be thrilled to see this. And of course, the rightful wife's sweet-talking uncles and aunts would need to be informed as well. Some of the uncles and aunts who regularly danced in the neighborhood square also lived nearby. They loved watching drama like this. Sarah had been Andrew's childhood neighbor and classmate. Her family was poor, and she nearly dropped out of middle school due to financial difficulties. It was Andrew's father who sponsored her education, allowing her to continue her studies. During college, Sarah attended a university in the same city as Andrew. The 2 schools were an hour and a half apart by bus. By all accounts, Sarah, coming from a struggling family, should have had no spare money. Yet, during her freshman year, she rented an apartment off campus, presumably to make it easier for Andrew to visit her. There were plenty of pictures of the 2 of them online, documenting their time together from youthful innocence to a more polished, mature image. Their clothes also became noticeably more expensive over the years. After graduating, Sarah joined the Carter family company before Andrew, using the pretext of repaying her benefactor's kindness. She worked as an administrative assistant and, over time, became a long-term employee. In addition to her base salary, A separate account would deposit extra money into her account every month. As I reviewed the compiled information on my phone, I organized my thoughts. In college, Andrew and I were in the same department. During the second semester of our sophomore year, I fell for him at first sight during a debate competition. Before confessing my feelings, I asked him and the people around him if he had a girlfriend. Everyone said no. That was when I decided to pursue him. Looking back now, I realize I had been played from the very beginning. Even more ridiculous was how the ever-gracious Joanna had been helping cover for them the entire time. All the while, I thought Andrew was a pitiful child held back by his parents. In my previous life, I never uncovered any of this, even until my death. Now, this newfound knowledge gave me plenty of material for exposure. A wave of well-edited leaks and revelations followed, meticulously timed. Within just a few days, Andrew's reputation was ruined in the social circles he had worked so hard to impress. Because of his clean-cut, pale, and slender appearance, people started calling him Little White-Eyed Wolf in online comments. Some who loved stirring the pot even fabricated outrageous stories about his past. Leaked records showing Andrew's father secretly sending him money over the years also surfaced. Clearly orchestrated by Mrs. Carter, she had been closely following my lead and even amplifying my efforts. After I had someone tip her off that Andrew had planted a mole in their company, her attacks on him became even more ruthless. It seemed Mrs. Carter could tolerate infidelity in marriage, but she would never forgive having what belonged to her children taken away. Andrew should have thought harder about what made him believe he had the right to claim his place in the Carter family. By Friday, I heard that Andrew had moved out of the Carter estate, in front of Mrs. Carter's family and friends. He swore never to use another cent of the Carter family's money. He even relinquished ownership of all properties under his name. On top of that, Sarah had been fired from the company, and Andrew personally escorted her back to her hometown. I was in a fantastic mood. I even felt a sudden urge to invite Joanna out for a meal to ask her for all the juicy details. But I restrained myself. Surprisingly, Andrew couldn't hold back and came to my house instead. It was pouring rain. He stood outside the iron gates of my villa, his face marred with visible scratches and bruises. The butler, wary of letting him in, held firm while Andrew shouted my name over and over, his voice desperate like a starving stray dog. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window on the second floor, holding a steaming cup of coffee, quietly watching him make a scene. It wasn't until he finally noticed me standing there that I nodded for someone to let him in. When we met face to face, he sneezed loudly, completely drenched from head to toe. His eyes and nose were red, making him look pitifully weak. I waited for him to speak, but he just stared at me intently, as if deliberately trying to evoke my sympathy. After a while, I lost patience and let out a heavy sigh. This carpet is quite expensive. If it gets wet, it'll be ruined. You know. Are you going to pay for it if you ruin it? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Andrew widened his eyes in disbelief, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to find his voice. Finally, he asked, "Can you tell me why? What exactly happened? I don't want things to end between us so inexplicably." In my past life, I had gone out of my way to treat him well, only for him to respond with curt, stingy words. Now that I was eager to get rid of him, suddenly he had so much to say. Piqued my curiosity, I propped my chin on my hand, watching him with amusement. "How did you convince Sarah to play along? She's been your official girlfriend for years. Even when she saw the two of us getting close, she didn't seem to mind. Did you already promise her she'd be your mistress? Or maybe your side chick?" For years, I had openly pursued Andrew. I never kept it a secret. Even the stray dogs on the streets must have known about it. Yet Sarah had never once come forward to clarify her relationship with him. It was baffling. Did she think Andrew was a promising investment worth her sacrifice? At the mention of Sarah's name, Andrew quickly lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. His hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists. After a long silence, he finally seemed to find an excuse and croaked out, "It's not what you think. I've only ever seen Sarah as a sister. You know I've never had much family." He suddenly took 2 steps closer, his gaze unnervingly firm as he looked at me. "No one's ever respected me. It wasn't until I met you that I found a bit of confidence. Emily, I've realized these past few days that you're all I truly have. Sarah is just my sister. I stared at him coldly. Sister? Huh. She must have thought that purple is a very sophisticated color. My expression darkened, and I clenched my fists. Monroe, there's something filthy here. Help me get rid of it. As soon as I finished speaking, the butler and 6 bodyguards appeared. This had become a habit ever since Andrew had started harassing me. Now, I rarely went anywhere without security. Over the past few days, I'd worked tirelessly to ruin Andrew's reputation, not just out of revenge, but to ignite infighting within the Carter family and bait their competitors into taking advantage of the chaos. Sure enough, rumors and scandals swirled around him, and trouble soon came knocking. Mr. Carter found himself overwhelmed, his wife too busy fighting for power and moving assets to help him manage the mess. The company's leadership descended into chaos, and under mounting pressure, Mr. Carter suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized. His wife didn't even visit him, seizing the opportunity of a leaderless family to promote her own relatives to key positions. I had been keeping a close eye on their company. Naturally, I struck while the iron was hot, teaming up with outsiders to carve up their projects, poach their key personnel, and corner them from all sides. My moves were precise, ruthless, and efficient, leaving my father astonished. Why are you suddenly targeting the Carters so aggressively? Their company isn't that big, he asked one day. I shrugged. Just because of a breakup. Revenge. You know. He frowned deeply. That's not right. Relationships are mutual. If it's over, it's over. You need to have the grace to accept the consequences. His words made me smile, but I said nothing. I lacked experience, so it was a perfect opportunity to practice as their family was in turmoil. It would also prepare me for managing bigger projects in the future. With an air of righteousness, I said, it's just normal business behavior. Nothing personal. Really. My father clearly didn't believe me, but since he had always been dissatisfied with how I had prioritized Andrew over my career, now that I was focusing on business, he fully supported me. Be steady in your actions and ruthless in correcting mistakes, he advised as I threw myself into identifying and rooting out the internal issues in our company to prevent future crises. Just as I was so busy that I had almost forgotten Andrew even existed. He showed up with his father to visit mine directly. My father, naturally suspicious, couldn't understand why they would suddenly come knocking. By the time I rushed home from work, the 3 men were sitting in the living room, forcing awkward smiles. The tension in the air was palpable. After a quick greeting, I sat down next to my father, only for him to lean over and quietly ask me, "Are you back with him?" Before I could deny it, Andrew, encouraged by his father's approving nod, suddenly knelt before me on one knee. He pulled a diamond ring from the inner pocket of his suit. "Emily, will you marry me?" My father's face darkened as he set his teacup down with a loud clink, his sharp gaze darting between me and Andrew. The pressure was suffocating. I immediately shook my head at my father, signaling that I had nothing to do with this. I didn't even know Andrew was planning this stunt. My father coughed, then turned to Andrew's father. Andrew's father quickly stood up, forcing a smile as he said, "Andrew and Emily have been in love for many years. Their feelings are deep. There were some misunderstandings before, but now Andrew is about to take over the family business. I promise Emily will never be wronged again." Andrew, his gaze unwavering, added, "I know you think I have ulterior motives, but I still want to try. I believe in your judgment, and I trust that you won't abandon me when I need you most. This is the best time to prove our love." His burning gaze made his intentions crystal clear. What he really meant was, "You want the best deal, and I'm the most suitable buyer you've found so far. Isn't that right?" I asked, "Is this about selling yourself for a good price?" Andrew faltered, his expression strained as if bearing a great burden. "I understand you. You value relationships more than anything else. I want to show you, through this gesture, that I won't let you down. From now on, we're family. I'm completely yours." At that, my father abruptly stood up and left without a word. Heading upstairs via the elevator, Andrew's father awkwardly tried to smooth things over, his forced smile faltering. "Uncle, Do you know about Sarah? I asked with a faint smile. Andrew's father hesitated before responding. What about her? He knew full well about Sarah's relationship with his son. He might have even been the one coaching Andrew, teaching him to emulate his own behavior of keeping one woman at home while entertaining another on the side. Sarah is your son's true love. I'm just the fool paying for everything. Don't let him keep hurting me, or I'll hold a grudge, I said softly, locking eyes with him as my smile deepened. He blinked rapidly, then turned to Andrew and, without hesitation, kicked him to the ground. Did you betray Emily? He roared. I had no intention of wasting any more time. Rising to my feet, I said coldly, That's enough. Joanna and her mother have already told me everything. Stop pretending. With that, I walked away, leaving behind a room filled with awkward silence. Those words weren't baseless slander, though they were skillfully coaxed out of Joanna and her mother by me. After delivering my parting shot, I left without looking back, taking the elevator up to the second-floor study to console my heartbroken father. I know you care about that boy, he began, his expression stern, his gaze sharp, but don't blame me for being ruthless. I won't allow the two of you to be together. Shameless people will stop at nothing. Stay away from him, or you'll face nothing but ruin. In the study, my father's face was grave, looking at the white hairs peppering his temples. I felt my emotions spiral out of control. He had said the exact same words in my past life, but back then, I was blinded by my infatuation. I lashed out at him, accusing him of being a snob who looked down on the humble Carter family. I even foolishly believed that Andrew's family treated me better than my own parents did. It turned out I had been too sheltered, too naive, unable to recognize the malice hidden in human hearts or distinguish genuine affection from manipulation. This time, I walked over to my father, knelt beside him, and leaned my head against his leg. Dad, you're right. I've learned my lesson. I won't give him another chance. He'll never rise again. Before he could respond, I quickly changed the subject, forcing a cheerful tone to dispel the heavy atmosphere. The greatest threat to any business is internal corruption. Regular self-audits are essential to prevent long-term damage. The Carter family is a perfect example of what happens when you don't. Look at the mess they're in now. Dad, we need to take their downfall as a lesson. We can't end up like them. Imagine us going to someone's house to propose and being thrown out. I hadn't blocked Andrew's contact information. He had a habit of sending me ridiculous messages, as if he were possessed by some tragic romantic hero. I found them amusing, using them as motivation to never forget the humiliation of my past life. Recently, though, he'd gone quiet, concerned that something was happening in the Carter family that I wasn't aware of. I discreetly had someone investigate his whereabouts. A few days later, I learned he was attending an investment promotion event. Sensing something suspicious, I cleared my schedule to attend as well. Ning Investment was a major player in the industry, and with Andrew's current standing, he shouldn't have been invited. Something was definitely up. When we crossed paths at the venue, I greeted him and the people around him with my signature polite smile. Hello, I'm Emily Lin from Shanghang Group. May I introduce myself? A man standing beside Andrew extended his hand for a brief handshake. He pulled out a business card, and we exchanged them. Hello, I'm Matt Fu, he said. The embossed card identified him as the president of Ning Investment. I couldn't help but study the young man in front of me more carefully. His striking features were bold and intense, with deep-set eyes that exuded a predatory charm. His relaxed, laid-back demeanor gave him an air of effortless authority, as if any room he stood in instantly became his living room. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Fu, I said smoothly. Now I understand why my father always speaks so highly of you. You're truly a role model for our generation. He laughed heartily, not even bothering to feign humility. Your father's insight is something we younger folks should aspire to. His nonchalant confidence was both intriguing and unsettling, but I kept my expression composed, hiding the flicker of curiosity that stirred within me. In the end, his words seemed more like self-praise than anything else. Mr. Fu, let's head to the office and continue our discussion, someone suggested. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but when Andrew saw me chatting with Matt Fu, A flicker of irritation flashed in his eyes. His tone carried a hint of anger when he interrupted. "We'll meet again later, Miss Lynn." Matt gave me an apologetic smile before turning to leave with Andrew. The two of them, both tall and imposing, exuded confidence as they walked away. Their striking backs were surprisingly complementary, almost a perfect match. Based on various investigations and what I knew about Andrew from my previous life, I could already guess what he was planning. However, playing the role of a hero who saves the day wasn't as simple as he might think. A high-stakes agreement? How could that be possible? Joanna fumed in frustration as we sat in a cafe. Who does Andrew think he is to make such a reckless decision? He's barely taken over the company. It's obvious he just wants to sell it off. I nodded in agreement. It's far too risky. A deal like this is akin to courting disaster. And besides, what makes him an illegitimate son, qualified to run the company? Who knows if he's secretly funneling assets elsewhere? Joanna gripped her phone tightly, her fingertips turning white. After a long pause, she looked at me with suspicion. "Emily, where did you hear this?" I smiled softly. The investor he's negotiating with happens to be my type. I might pursue him. With that, the rumors I wanted to spread were set in motion. Later that evening, I invited Matt Fu to dinner. At the table, he lounged in his chair with an air of casual elegance, gently swirling his glass of red wine. His long fingers tapped idly on the rim of the glass, and the tailored black shirt he wore accentuated his broad shoulders and smooth physique. "You invited me to dinner, yet all you talk about is Andrew. Why not invite him directly?" he asked, his deep voice tinged with amusement. "Do I look that free to you?" I forced a polite laugh. Extracting information was an art, and it was all the more challenging when the person across from you was a seasoned fox. "Fine," I thought. "Let's go with honesty." I took out a proposal from my bag and handed it to Matt. He opened it and, upon seeing the title, his brow arched slightly. He straightened in his seat as he read further. "Shared economy?" he remarked, his voice laced with intrigue. "Miss Lynn, this concept is quite unique. Very forward-thinking. It was just the advantage of being reborn. Mr. Fu, I trust your judgment. Are you interested in partnering? Miss Lynn, if you're starting a business, you likely have no shortage of potential partners. Why choose me?" "It's not about me choosing you," I replied, meeting his gaze as I raised my glass. "It's about whether you'll choose between Andrew and me. Pick one." My words were deliberate, measured. I wanted him to decide which project had greater value, which person was more worth his investment. I knew he was smart enough to figure it out. When we parted, light rain fell outside. Matt held an umbrella and walked me to my car. Our bodies were so close they nearly touched. As I opened the car door, he spoke in a low, velvety tone, his voice unexpectedly seductive. "He's not worthy of you." I paused briefly, smiled faintly, and said goodbye to him. The internal strife within Carter Corporation was severe, teetering on the edge of collapse. It had already become a topic of gossip within the industry, while I took advantage of the storm brewing in their family to clean up my own household. My actions appeared entirely justifiable. However, after uncovering more issues, my father refused to let me continue. He forcibly dragged me abroad to attend meetings. On Saturday, one of our foreign partners hosted a ball at their estate. My father, dealing with a headache, asked me to accompany a few senior executives in his place. I hadn't expected to see Matt Fu in the grand hall. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his tall frame and confident posture standing out amidst the crowd of socialites. He moved through the bustling scene with grace and ease, exuding an effortless charm. The classical music flowing through the room seemed to exist solely for him. I set down my wine glass and approached him. With a slight bow, I extended my hand in invitation. "Mr. Fu, may I have this dance?" His eyes lit up, and he returned the gesture with elegant composure. "It would be an honor." I placed my hand on his shoulder while his arm encircled my waist. Our hands clasped, and we moved in sync with the rhythm. The harmony between us was unexpectedly seamless. As the dance neared its end, the woman closest to me suddenly twisted her ankle, screaming as she fell toward us. Matt reacted swiftly, pulling me into his arms and out of harm's way. The woman collapsed unceremoniously at our feet. Feeling slightly embarrassed, I quickly bent down to help her up. However, she didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she addressed Matt in fluent French, teasing, "Such a perfect opportunity for a hero to save a damsel in distress. How could you let it slip away?" Standing behind me with his hands clasped casually behind his back, Matt replied smoothly in French, his deep voice rich and melodious. "I didn't let it slip away. Thank you for the opportunity." The woman arched a brow, feigning disappointment before turning to me. In clumsy Chinese, she said, "Hello, beautiful." This small incident, unexpected as it was, lightened my mood. It reminded me that life could still be carefree and filled with joy. However, mindful of my father's health, I didn't stay at the estate too late and left early. Driving down the winding mountain road, I noticed a car suddenly appear behind me, tailgating aggressively as if it intended to ram into my vehicle at any moment. I immediately realized it was a deliberate act of retaliation. Recently, I had been investigating accounts and had fired several freeloading relatives and long-serving staff from the company. Though I had provided them with proper compensation, they remained dissatisfied. The memory of my death in my previous life, crushed, contorted, and obliterated in a violent explosion, flashed through my mind. My heart raced, but I clenched the steering wheel tightly, vowing not to meet the same fate again. Steadying my nerves, I floored the accelerator and maneuvered through several sharp turns. Just as I thought I had created some distance and reached for my phone to call for help, a blinding white light beamed directly at me from the front. I couldn't see anything. Panicking, I swerved the wheel hard. A split second later, a deafening crash echoed, and the car shook violently. The airbag deployed, slamming into me with force. Dizzy and disoriented, I couldn't afford to linger. I unbuckled my seatbelt, grabbed my phone, and stumbled out of the car. I staggered toward the woods, running as fast as I could. No matter what, I couldn't just sit and wait for death. Behind me, I heard the heavy, chaotic sound of footsteps. At least 2 people chasing me. I pushed myself to run downhill, dodging branches and stones, until a figure suddenly appeared from below. It was Matt. He had noticed something was wrong with the crash site on the mountain road, and immediately drove to the next curve, climbing up to find me. Before long, we made it back to the main road. I got into his car, and we sped away, having narrowly escaped death. I wiped the blood off my face and began laughing uncontrollably. "Are you okay?" Matt asked, startled. "Surviving a disaster means future blessings," I said, still chuckling. "Do you believe that?" "Matt, believe? Sure. I believe whatever you say. You could tell me the sun's in the sky right now, and I'd believe you," he replied. I glanced at the bright moon ahead, its glow illuminating the night. Smiling faintly, I let out another small laugh. The car raced down the road, the ride far from smooth. At some point, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed. The police, Matt, my father, and others were all gathered around me. Andrew was reportedly on a plane and would arrive soon. After giving my statement to the police, I reached for my phone, but Matt suddenly spoke up. I froze mid-motion. "What's he coming for?" I asked. "Who knows?" Matt replied. "It's not like this has anything to do with him. Does he know how to treat patients or solve crimes?" My father chimed in with a sarcastic tone. "Exactly." But when he turned to Matt, his voice softened, and he smiled warmly. "Thanks to you, Matt. When you're back home, come to our house for dinner. Your aunt would love to cook for you." "Of course. I'd be happy to visit," Matt replied graciously. "How did Andrew even find out about my accident?" I asked, turning to Matt. He hesitated briefly before answering. "On the way to the hospital. You kept calling out Andrew's name. He was calling your phone at the same time, so I picked up. As soon as he heard about the accident, he insisted on coming over. It's obvious he cares about you." I vaguely remembered fragments of disjointed dreams. Andrew forcing me to kneel before Sarah. Him locking me out in the freezing cold one winter morning. His father making lewd comments about me while Andrew stood by silently. I also saw the breathtaking autumn sunset on the day of our wedding anniversary, just before Andrew left me behind to escape our crashed car. Be a good person in your next life. His voice echoed from every direction, repeating over and over. It wasn't until the car exploded that I was finally freed. When Andrew arrived, hurried and disheveled, my father didn't even bother greeting him before leaving, assigning a few bodyguards to stay and guard me. The air grew awkward, and Andrew seemed visibly uncomfortable. The doctor, standing nearby, hesitated to speak. Andrew fidgeted nervously, unable to bridge the silence. I didn't help ease the tension. Instead, I watched him coldly. After a long moment, he forced an unnatural smile. "Are you okay?" I shook my head slightly and replied in a distant, polite tone. "Thank you for coming to see me. I'm fine now. You should go back," I said calmly. Andrew's smile stiffened on his face. "If you're leaving, I can reimburse your round-trip ticket," I added kindly. For a moment, his eyes burned with anger, as though he wanted to retort, but he held back, turning away. He stood silently for a long time before speaking in a hoarse voice. "Emily, don't forget. You were the one who came after me first. Don't bring up the past," I replied with a sigh, sounding almost tired. "I find it humiliating too." He looked as though my words had hit him like a whip. "You know," I continued, "in life or death situations, it's easy for a girl to mistake gratitude for affection toward her savior. But Andrew, I already like someone else. From now on, please keep your distance. I don't want my reputation to suffer because of you." Andrew whipped around, the vein on his temple twitching. "Emily, are you playing me? If that's what you want to think, I can't stop you." I looked at him with genuine sincerity, but the sight of his trembling frame made me quickly add, "Isn't Sarah the one you love? Don't worry. I won't bother you anymore. Take this chance to treasure her properly." He took a deep breath, his eyes swirling with storms of emotion. In the end, there was only a trace of desperation left. "Emily, please, help me out this one time. I don't want to lose. Stop dreaming." A heavy silence stretched between us before his expression twisted with anger. Suddenly, he lunged toward me, arms outstretched. His face was contorted with rage. Before he could reach me, my bodyguards quickly stepped in, grabbing him by the arms and dragging him back. "You be asterisk 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 asterisk. You turn your back on me just like that? What did I ever do to you?" he screamed. His red-rimmed eyes filled with fury as he struggled against their grip. I stood unmoved, a faint smile playing on my lips as I watched him being dragged away. The Carter family's mess had already reached the point where they couldn't function without him. For Andrew to leave everything behind and fly abroad to see me, it meant he had already realized that staying was meaningless. I was his last hope, and the Lynn family was his only escape route. My suspicion was quickly confirmed when I learned that the Carter family's finances were on the verge of collapse and had attracted the attention of regulatory authorities. An audit could strike at any moment. In my past life, this was how the Lynn family fell too, which was why I had acted so urgently this time, even if it brought trouble upon myself. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital and flew back home. As soon as we left the airport, my father called Matt and invited him over for dinner. When I got home, Matt was already sitting on the sofa in our living room, chatting and laughing with my mother. The two of them seemed as close as a mother and son. Feeling slightly jealous, I rushed over and clung to my mother's arm like a spoiled child. "Mom, I almost couldn't see you again." Her eyes turned red, and she hugged me tightly. "You nearly scared me to death. You should thank Matt properly. If it weren't for him, how could I go on?" Hearing her words, I suddenly remembered how, in my past life after marrying Andrew, my mother disliked him so much that she insisted on living alone. I wondered, when Andrew had heard about my accident, was there anyone by his side to comfort him? Or was he completely shattered, his heart broken into pieces? During dinner, my parents were so overwhelmingly warm toward Matt that it almost felt excessive. Under the table, I discreetly kicked Matt's foot and whispered, "Notice anything unusual?" Matt turned his head slightly, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "What?" I raised a brow. "In situations like this, all you need to do is casually mention you have a girlfriend, and you'll be off the hook." He playfully ran his fingers through the strands of hair brushing his forehead, feigning innocence. "Why would I want to escape? Your parents keep praising me. It's quite flattering. Don't you feel the same? After dinner, I walked Matt out. But before we could get far from the gate, we spotted Andrew pacing under a street lamp. He looked exhausted, with heavy bags under his eyes, though his beard was freshly shaven, and his clothes were meticulously neat. It was clear he had made an effort to appear presentable before coming to find me. Andrew's gaze darkened when he saw Matt. Matt shot me a complicated look, and I smiled faintly. Matt, lend me your arm for a moment, I said casually. Matt, ever the sharp observer, walked toward Andrew before I could say another word. Without hesitation, he gently brushed the stray strands of hair from my forehead, his expression tender and natural, before turning to Andrew as if nothing had happened. What brings you here, Mr. Carter? Andrew's eyes flicked between Matt and me. After a long silence, it was as if something clicked in his mind. He let out a bitter laugh and said, "So, Mr. Fu canceled the deal to please his lover. You two have been in cahoots from the start, haven't you?" "No, that's not true," I said hastily, meeting Andrew's gaze. For a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "It's not a lover," I said, dragging out the words with a mix of pride and mischief. "It's the girl he likes." Matt chuckled softly, his laughter carrying an ambiguous undertone. Worried he might undermine me, I clung tighter to his arm. "Though your accusations are off the mark, I don't mind how they sound," Matt said. "After all, business isn't personal. Don't lose hope, Mr. Carter. Perhaps there will be opportunities to collaborate in the future." Andrew's face twitched, realizing how poorly he measured up to Matt. After a moment of silence, he turned and began to leave. "Andrew," I called after him, "are you in trouble? Do you need my help?" He froze mid-step, standing still for what felt like an eternity before finally turning around. His pride had clearly taken a beating. "I just want to know," he said hoarsely. "Did you ever truly love me?" I sighed wistfully, as if regretting my answer. "I don't think I ever did." His pupils dilated, the truth striking him like a blow. "Your timing is unfortunate," I added, glancing at Matt. "My boyfriend is right here. Do you want to start an argument between us?" Matt interjected smoothly, his voice soft yet brimming with emotion. "Oh, we won't argue, but I do feel sorry for you, Miss Lynn, having had to deal with someone like him." His eyes shimmered with a mix of light and warmth as he gazed at me. Andrew's shoulders slumped, and he lowered his head, looking utterly defeated. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The Carter family declared bankruptcy shortly afterward. Andrew's father ended up in prison. Meanwhile, Joanna and her mother, sensing the impending disaster, filed for divorce just in time. They fled abroad with their money, leaving Andrew, the illegitimate son, with nothing but piles of debt. "Do you hate Andrew because of love turned to resentment?" Matt asked casually one day after a business meeting. I paused, caught off guard, before slumping back onto the couch with a laugh. "That's a bit dramatic," I replied. "I can't think of any other reason. You seem to care about him a lot. But all those little schemes of yours, you've practically driven him to ruin." Matt's curiosity was evident, his interest oddly persistent. "I did stir the pot a little," I admitted with a smirk. "I undermined his relationship with Joanna's mother, incited the company's higher-ups to oppose his promotion, fanned the flames of internal conflicts, and reported their fraudulent accounting practices. But none of that was because of love or hatred." Matt raised an eyebrow, his intrigue growing. "On the contrary," I continued, "it's because he hated me for no reason. I couldn't let him rise too high or gain too much. If I told you that Andrew becomes dangerous when he's rich, and it's safer for society when he's broke, would you believe me?" Matt chuckled, amused by my seriousness. "I'm telling the truth," I said, leaning forward. "The saying 'a wolf in the mountains becomes reckless when fed' fits him perfectly." Still, life hadn't been easy for me either. Investigating and cutting ties with those freeloading relatives in the company had upset them, and they found creative ways to pressure me into marriage. They kept introducing potential suitors, as if marrying me off would turn me into an outsider, severing my control over the family business. My mother, overwhelmed by hosting 3 waves of relatives a day, finally had enough. She pointed to Matt and declared, "My daughter already has a boyfriend in the investment world. They'll get married soon." The news spread like wildfire through the business community. I privately apologized to Matt, but to my surprise, he seemed quite pleased with the situation. "If you're willing," he said, "we can go to the marriage registry anytime." My treat. Terrified, I shook my head vigorously. The scars left by my 8 years of marriage in my previous life were still too fresh, too indelible. This time, I only wanted to live freely, following my own heart. Matt suddenly leaned in, his gaze burning into mine. "In ancient times, saving someone's life meant you owed them your own. How can you be so ungrateful?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "We're business partners. You can either focus on money or romance, but not both." He straightened up, laughing softly. "You're so smart. Why not do both?" I hesitated, caught off guard, before eventually laughing along. "Maybe it's worth a shot. I'm only in my 20s. Can't let the best years of my life go to waste." The shared economy concept I introduced gained massive traction in the market. Once it peaked, I quickly cashed out and exited the stage, leaving no regrets behind. From then on, I shadowed Matt, learning everything I could, and gradually grew into an independent investor. Leveraging the insights and foresight from my previous life, I focused on identifying high-potential projects and helping talented but resource-starved individuals realize their dreams. In just a few years, I gained widespread recognition and made a name for myself. Without relying on the Lin family as a shield anymore, I had become my parents' fallback for the future instead. Teaching a student too well might starve the teacher. And Matt sometimes felt like he was being taken advantage of. He'd occasionally get dramatic about it, but I had my own way of making him happy. I'd simply step forward and silence his complaints with a kiss. That never failed to lift his mood, and I quite enjoyed feeding his ego in such a pleasant way. At the end of the year, I traveled to a small third-tier city for business and unexpectedly ran into Sarah. She was unrecognizable from before. Her appearance had completely transformed. Dressed in expensive clothes and radiating confidence, she seemed to glow with a newfound charm. On a whim, I struck up a conversation about Andrew. "Why didn't you end up with Andrew?" In my previous life, Andrew's hatred for me stemmed from Sarah's death. But in this life, after being separated from him, Sarah was alive and well. I was genuinely curious about the entanglement between the two of them and how I had somehow gotten caught in the crossfire. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then gave me a bitter smile. She explained, "Back then, I relied on Andrew for everything, emotionally and financially. I was terrified of losing him, and I couldn't imagine a life without him. To me, he was the one holding up my sky. Whenever I thought about him being taken away, it felt like my entire world was about to collapse." She paused, then continued with a tinge of regret. "But I could never bring myself to tell Andrew about my fears. I knew he didn't have the patience to deal with my emotions. My world revolved around him, but his world was so much bigger. The only thing I had going for me was my obedience. So I always supported him unconditionally, even when he wanted to use you, even when he refused to give me a proper title, even when he sent me back to my hometown. I never complained. After leaving him for good, I realized the sky wouldn't actually fall. My world became bigger, and I didn't have to carry so much anymore. If I had stayed with him, I think my life would have only had two possible outcomes: either dying from suffocation or going insane from frustration." She looked at me apologetically. "Emily, I'm sorry. Back then, I should have spoken up, even if it was just to give you a heads up. Maybe you wouldn't have wasted so much time and emotion on him." So that was the truth. In my previous life, Andrew had shamelessly juggled two relationships, completely disregarding Sarah's feelings. Sarah, his supposed first love, could only watch from the shadows as Andrew flaunted our seemingly perfect relationship. She swallowed all her pain and resentment until she couldn't take it anymore, and chose to end her life by jumping into the sea. Unable to accept her death, Andrew shifted all the blame onto me. In his mind, I should never have existed, never have tempted him into wrongdoing. He built a moral pedestal in his heart, casting judgment on me, another victim, just to deceive himself. He told himself that he had truly loved Sarah, that he was forced into his actions. and that he would never forget her for the rest of his life. He needed to believe he was a good man, a romantic soul. Fortunately, this time around, both Sarah and I escaped unscathed. Meanwhile, Andrew's life fell apart. He was penniless, homeless, and constantly on the run. At his lowest point, debt collectors broke his legs and threw him into the sea, leaving him on the brink of death. It wasn't as if he hadn't tried to seek my help. He had staked out near my company building and even my home, but I managed to avoid him every time. Later, as the gap between us grew too vast, he couldn't find any information about me anymore. However, I could always keep tabs on him. For example, I recently learned that he had taken a job as a rideshare driver. Unfortunately for him, a kid had stuck a sticker on his license plate without him noticing, and when he drove off, his license points were completely deducted. I looked up at the distant sky with a small smile. Those who betray genuine love, how could they expect a happy ending? On my 30th birthday, Matt proposed to me at a seaside hotel. Months earlier, I had already discovered the prenuptial agreement he'd prepared. I knew what he was planning and had given it considerable thought. By then, I had my answer, but when the moment finally came, I summoned all my acting skills to feign surprise, delight, and even panic before slowly shaking my head. With a tinge of sadness, I said, "You know I don't like marriage contracts. I don't like being bound by responsibilities." He remained on one knee for a long moment, stunned. Then, without warning, he stood, grabbed my arms, and kissed me. The scent of plum wine lingered on his lips as he murmured indistinctly, "Then do you like me? I want a title. I need one." Leaning back, I couldn't help but laugh and scold him. "Stop acting like this. You're behaving like a child begging for candy." He let go of me, but the dangerous glint in his amber eyes only grew stronger. "Fine, fine," he said, his tone low and magnetic. "No more childish games. Let's try something more mature." His eyes smoldered with intensity as his long fingers deftly untied his tie. First, he wrapped it around one of my wrists, then the other, binding them together and raising them above my head. He leaned down, his chin resting on my hair, his body radiating heat. "Emily, listen to me carefully," he whispered, his voice deep and commanding. "I'll give you love and freedom. Take it. Enjoy it. Love is fleeting and unpredictable, impossible to guard against. Perhaps it's better to embrace the emotions of the moment and cherish the rare, impulsive feelings that become harder to find as we grow older." With a hoarse voice, I agreed. By late spring and May, the Lynn family hosted a grand wedding, lavish and filled with notable guests. Dressed in a flowing wedding gown with a long train, I walked through a path lined with blooming flowers. Under the gaze of family and friends, I approached the groom, Matt. His eyes were red as he gently took my hand and kissed it, a single tear slipping from his lowered gaze. But when he straightened, his expression lit up with a dazzling smile, bold and full of life. "I told you," he said with a teasing grin. "A life-saving favor demands a lifelong repayment. There's no escaping. My wife. 3 years ago, I married Ethan. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, but only I knew there was someone else intruding in this perfect love. His younger sister, Emily. On the night of our 3rd wedding anniversary, Ethan claimed he wasn't feeling well and insisted Emily needed his care. Moments later, I received a mocking text message from her. That night, when I had an asthma attack, I finally realized it was time to let go. If I could live my life over, I'd end things before they even began. I'd personally push Ethan out of my world. Even if he was left utterly broken and filled with regret, I wouldn't feel a shred of pity. On our 3rd wedding anniversary, Emily called Ethan away again. This time, he kissed my forehead softly as if to reassure me before leaving. "Emily says she's not feeling well. I'll be back soon," he said. But I knew he wouldn't come back that night. He knew all too well about her manipulative ways. Yet he indulged her endlessly. And then, like clockwork, he would return to appease me. The enormous living room felt cold and desolate. My pale face reflected on the marble floor. On the coffee table, the cake we had bought to celebrate our anniversary sat untouched, its candles still flickering faintly. I clutched my chest, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Should I cry over this marriage? Corrupted by a hidden third party? Or should I laugh because I had finally decided to set myself free? I didn't know how much time had passed when fireworks started lighting up the sky outside. Then a message from Emily appeared on my phone. Sister-in-law, did you see the fireworks? Ethan had chosen this house because he knew how much I loved the way the sunset poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The living room alone was over 1,000 square feet, offering a view of the river winding through the city. Now, the silent night sky was illuminated by dazzling fireworks, their reflections bright in my dark eyes. My brother was worried I'd be bored alone in the hospital, so he had someone set these off for me. I heard it's your wedding anniversary today, so I'm being generous and letting you enjoy them too. Her words were like daggers, stabbing deep into my heart. They drew no blood, but they twisted and churned, leaving me gasping for air. My hands trembled, and my phone slipped to the ground. Her messages lay exposed on the screen, each one piercing like a blade. The man who had just been making anniversary wishes with me was now peeling an apple for her. His handsome face was slightly lowered, exuding infinite tenderness. The very gentlemanly demeanor I once took pride in now made me sick to my stomach. You've lost. Having children isn't exclusive to married couples. What you can give him, I can give him too. I couldn't catch my breath. My chest heaved violently as panic consumed me. My legs struck the coffee table, and I collapsed to the floor. The asthma inhaler was just a few steps away, but no matter how desperately I reached out, I couldn't overcome the suffocating lack of air. As death approached, the last thing I knew was that my husband had lit up the city's sky with fireworks for another woman, while his wife lay dying quietly at home, without even a chance to be saved. But then, I woke up. The sound of my roommate's voice jolted me awake. Anna, we need to hurry to the lecture hall. I saved you a seat, but we're running out of time. I glanced at my phone and realized I was back in college, back to a time before Ethan had confessed his feelings for me. I hastily agreed and ran to the lecture hall, still dazed as I took my seat. Before I could fully process what was happening, someone nudged my shoulder with the tip of a pen. A piece of chocolate appeared in front of me. Your roommate said you skipped lunch. Here, have something sweet to tide you over. That familiar voice surrounded me, but it was lighter, filled with the youthful energy of a college student. This wasn't the composed and steady Ethan of years later. Looking at him now, his bangs framed his face, exuding a boyish charm that tugged at the heart. I remembered when Ethan started working. His youthful appearance often made patients doubt his credibility. To help him look more professional, I started styling his hair. With his forehead revealed and a pair of glasses perched on his nose, his image instantly transformed into that of a dependable professional. In the mirror, I could see the faint blush spreading across Ethan's face. Though he had been practicing as a doctor for several years, he still couldn't handle teasing well. His thin skin betrayed him, and his cheeks turned red under my playful taunts. Unable to retaliate in words, he pushed me gently against the wall and kissed me with a force that made my head spin. Still laughing? He asked, attempting to act mature and composed, but instead coming across like a puppy baring its tiny teeth. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Okay, I'm not laughing anymore, I said, raising my hands in surrender. That day, I was the one who begged for mercy before it finally ended. Ethan, despite his soft and innocent appearance, could be surprisingly stubborn and fierce when he wanted to be. Looking back on these moments now, there wasn't any sweetness left in the memories. I used to think we would bicker and laugh like this for the rest of our lives. But when I calculated the time, our marriage hadn't even lasted 3 years. I smiled faintly and politely declined his offer of chocolate. I've been having toothaches recently. It's better if I avoid sweets. Ethan's bangs drooped slightly over his forehead, and for a moment, he looked like a dejected puppy abandoned by the roadside, even his figurative tail drooping in disappointment. My roommate, trying to stifle a laugh, covered her mouth with the book and whispered, "Did Ethan upset you?" Ethan's pursuit of me was well known among our circle. Every time we had a class in a large lecture hall, he would always sit next to me. I didn't find out until graduation that he had chosen internal medicine over surgery, specifically to better care for me. To stop me from overthinking, he deliberately didn't tell me. He said it was his decision and didn't want me to feel guilty and accept his feelings out of obligation. Before Emily appeared in his life, Ethan's world had revolved entirely around me. When Emily became his first patient, she was just 16 years old. Her pale face was as small as a palm, drained of all color. Ethan, still an intern at the time, was terrified that Emily might become the first patient he ever lost. He was extraordinarily attentive to her, taking care of her daily needs, bringing her fruits, and even coaxing her during routine checkups. Emily misunderstood his kindness. She started blushing whenever she saw Ethan and found excuses to cling to him, often feigning weakness to get him to hold her hand or stay by her side. On the day of her surgery, when no one from her family showed up, the truth came out. Her parents had abandoned her, unable to afford the high medical costs. Devastated and hopeless, Emily tried to end her life by jumping from a high building. Ethan lost control and made a promise to her in his desperation. I was standing right behind him at the time, watching him focus entirely on that fragile girl who seemed on the verge of disappearing. For the first time, he didn't look at me. For the first time, he made a decision without involving me. Later, Emily was officially added to the family registry of Ethan's household. At just 16 years old, she smiled with an innocent, crescent-eyed charm. "What should we do, big sister? I got into Ethan's family before you did." In that moment, I felt a hollow emptiness in my chest, as though someone had carved a gaping hole in my heart. Cold, biting winds seemed to blow through endlessly, leaving my hands and feet icy. I pulled myself out of the memory and calculated the time. There were still 3 years left until Emily's appearance in Ethan's life. Ethan had graduated a year later than us due to his medical studies. If I could avoid interacting too much with him during this time, I could change the fate of my death. Back then, in my youthful arrogance, I believed I could never lose to a girl who had suddenly appeared in Ethan's life. But in the end, I had even lost my life to her. Looking back now, it truly wasn't worth it. I hadn't yet explored the vast world or measured its endless possibilities. And yet I had died such an absurd death. When people are at a loss for words, they really do laugh. I shook my head and pushed the memory of that day's chocolate to the back of my mind. But the next day, as my roommate and I were leaving the library, we saw Ethan standing in front of the dormitory building with medicine in his hands, waiting for me. "No matter what, you really need to be clear with him," my roommate said, her face tinged with hesitation. After all, Ethan's brilliance was plain for everyone to see. A natural talent, from a wealthy family, and with a flawless personality to match. It was precisely because of these qualities that people like Emily and others gravitated toward him. The cracks in our relationship had appeared long ago. I've always been terrible at expressing myself, holding everything in until I can't say a single word. Ethan, with his professional warmth and kindness to everyone, made me doubt whether he even liked me for who I was. Was it all just because he wanted to play savior? "Didn't you say yesterday that your teeth were hurting? I bought you some medicine." He held up a plastic bag, but with his striking looks, even the simple bag seemed to carry a hefty price tag. "I don't need it," I said coldly, refusing outright. Ethan's face showed a flicker of nervousness. "I meant to bring it to you this morning, but the professor changed the schedule last minute, and I couldn't get here until now," he stammered, his explanation clumsy and far from the composed and steady demeanor he would later adopt. This was a far cry from the man who, years later, could lie to me effortlessly while conspiring with Emily. Looking at the bright-eyed boy in front of me, I couldn't reconcile him with the man he would become. How could someone change so drastically, almost overnight? In the end, I didn't take the medicine. Instead, I made our relationship clear. "I'm preparing for graduate school. I don't want to waste time on anything else. I hope we can keep things strictly as classmates from now on." Ethan said nothing. He walked away, looking utterly dejected. When I returned upstairs, my roommate looked at me, her face full of pity. "Wasn't that a bit harsh? You know he could probably hear you from the first floor." But even with their guilt-ridden looks, I felt nothing. If his pain now could guarantee my peace in the future, then I would rather he be heartbroken today. It was better for us to have no connection at all. After that day, Ethan truly stopped approaching me. When he saw me on campus, he would lower his head and avoid eye contact, like a frightened quail. Eventually, I was accepted into my graduate program and focused on my studies. Occasionally, I would hear news about him. People said he had won another scholarship, and become the prized protege of his department's professor. Upon graduating, he secured an internship at the best hospital in the area. Everything was progressing exactly as it had in my previous life, except for our relationship. 4 years passed, and the monotony of academia almost made me forget Ethan entirely. Yet, in the still of the night, I could still feel the pain and despair of my final moments. Even though I would wake up in shock, my eyes no longer shed tears. Later, I found a stable job as an associate at a law firm. My latest case involved a hospital dispute. A family suspected a doctor of overcharging, leading the patient to pay for unnecessary treatments. Big-shot lawyers wouldn't bother with such a case, and slightly more established ones didn't want it either. It ultimately landed on me and a junior lawyer who had just been promoted. When we arrived at the hospital, the family was causing a scene in the lobby, waving bills in the air and yelling accusations. Amid the chaos, my eyes landed on Ethan. After years apart, he now stood tall and confident, like a bamboo tree reaching for the sky. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his white coat, his youthful softness replaced by a refined elegance, as polished as jade. Even as a family member grabbed his collar in a fit of rage, he remained silent and composed. The junior lawyer beside me, Carter, quickly stepped forward to defuse the situation, pulling the family member away. Meanwhile, Ethan's gaze landed directly on me, unwavering and sharp. With our intervention, the situation was soon under control. Carter motioned for me to step out and buy supplies, leaving me with little choice but to comply. As he led the family and the hospital administrator into the mediation room, Ethan's eyes followed me. I knew he was trying to prevent the family's emotional outbursts from harming anyone else. But wasn't Ethan the one who ended up being hurt? I crouched by the vending machine outside, the autumn sun shining down and warming the top of my head. Despite it being late fall, the sunlight carried a comforting warmth. A bottle of orange soda was handed to me. The long, slender fingers holding it were slightly flushed at the tips, the nails clean and neat. A faint scent of disinfectant lingered on his hands. Thanks. My relationship with Ethan wasn't close enough anymore for me to feel uncomfortable with such gestures, so I accepted the bottle without hesitation. He crouched beside me, his voice low. I thought I'd never see you again. I gripped the bottle tightly, laughing softly. Truthfully, I still felt uneasy being alone with him, even though the events of our past life seemed like they were behind us. The pain from back then, however, lingered. I didn't respond. Silence stretched between us, long and heavy. Outside, people bustled back and forth, unaffected by the earlier commotion. The lively sounds of the crowd only accentuated the awkward stillness between us. So, you're a doctor now. That's impressive, I said, breaking the silence with a polite compliment. I had no choice but to keep the conversation going while Carter was still inside. To my surprise, Ethan's eyes reddened. What was wrong with him now? Why was he getting emotional so easily? Before I could process it, he lowered his voice, the sorrow in his tone unmistakable. I studied medicine. Yes. So, you've really forgotten me? I'm the only one still trapped in the past. His words were quiet, like a cloud floating through the sky, but his expression was grave, as though accusing me of being heartless. I remained silent for a long moment before sighing. From Ethan's perspective in this life, he hadn't done anything wrong. In college, he had tried to get closer to me, only to be met with rejection. Even on graduation day, he stood silently in the distance, holding a bouquet of flowers, watching as I took photos with countless classmates. That bouquet ended up being handed to me by my roommate, but later that night, I threw it into the trash without hesitation before boarding my flight home. Looking back, my behavior must have seemed cruel to him, but in the world he didn't know, my actions were simply part of my normal defenses. As I crouched there, my legs started to go numb, and I stood up to shake them out, but I lost my balance and fell forward. Ethan reacted quickly, catching me before I hit the ground. Thank goodness. Your face is fine, I muttered, covering my face in relief. For the first time, I softened my tone. Thanks. Ethan glanced at me, squinting slightly as he smiled. It's no problem. Even if you had injured your face, I'd find a skilled surgeon for you. No scars. Guaranteed. The tension between us eased with those few words. As we talked, it felt like we'd returned to the days of college. Ethan still had his sharp features and clean-cut demeanor, though there was now an added layer of maturity that didn't quite belong to him back then. I realized that the world keeps turning, even without someone's presence. Ethan had grown into himself without me there to adjust his collar or fix his hairstyle. Life doesn't stop or falter because someone isn't in it. Ethan's voice pulled me back. I feel the same way. The sunlight shifted slightly as Carter emerged from the building. His face bore the visible exhaustion of dealing with the family, while the relatives, in contrast, seemed invigorated. To an outsider, it might even look like they drained Carter financially rather than the other way around. I was about to approach Carter to say something when an all-too-familiar voice rang in my ears. A voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Brother. The first time Emily stepped into the home I shared with Ethan was the day after we returned from our honeymoon. She showed up at our door with the small suitcase, effortlessly letting herself in using the code for the door lock. "Where's my brother?" she asked. Ethan, after a grueling effort to secure time off for our honeymoon, had gone back to work the very next day. We had discussed this arrangement in advance. He would handle work outside while I managed things at home. But Emily's sudden arrival was something I hadn't anticipated. When I called Ethan, his nurse told me he was in surgery, left with no other choice. I let Emily stay temporarily. She explained she'd had a falling out with her roommate and planned to move out of the dorms. When Ethan found out that evening, he rejected the idea immediately. "I just got married. What does it look like if you move in with us?" Years of working had transformed Ethan. His once bright eyes had deepened, carrying a weight of maturity. "Tomorrow, go look for an apartment. Pick one you like, and I'll pay for it," he said firmly. Emily pouted. Her delicate features, enhanced by years of pampering, made her look radiant. I was just about to step in and smooth things over when she suddenly got up, draped herself over Ethan's back, and leaned in close to whisper into his ear, her peach-colored lips almost brushing against him. "Aren't you worried something bad might happen if I live alone?" I stared at the scene in disbelief, clutching my chopsticks tightly. Ethan, however, seemed unfazed, as if he was used to her behavior. He casually removed her hands from his shoulders. "You're an adult now, Emily. You can't act like this anymore." She stomped her foot. "Fine. I'm an adult. I'll move out, get a boyfriend, and bring him home." "You wouldn't dare," Ethan replied flatly. In the end, Emily stayed. Ethan justified it by saying she was still young, and that we could treat it as practice for taking care of a child. But a child wouldn't show up in silk nightgowns late at night to visit Ethan while he worked. A child wouldn't curl up with him on the couch, feeding him snacks as they watched TV together. And a child certainly wouldn't use the excuse of a broken showerhead to call Ethan in to fix it. What began as subtle attempts to test boundaries had turned into blatant provocations. Emily's presence fast-tracked my nightmares, leaving me on edge. Now, even just hearing her call Ethan brother made the hairs on my neck stand on end. Back in the present, Ethan introduced her to me with a smile. "This is my first patient." I couldn't hear the rest of his words clearly, but I didn't need to. The answer was already obvious. He had fallen for her ploys. Before our marriage, Emily had lived in the Old Song family estate in a different city. So why was she here now, holding a lunchbox? Had they already started living together? I forced a smile, trying to keep the resentment from my past life from surfacing in my expression. If I wanted to live this life without the burden of hatred, I needed to teach myself to sever those emotions. "I didn't know you were married," Emily said, her tone light. "Next time, I'll make sure to send a proper wedding gift." Ethan looked at me with an unmistakable seriousness. "She's listed as my sister on the household registry now. I'm single. I've never been married." The sudden revelation made Carter interject with a playful grin. "So, Dr. Song, you were married young? Didn't see that coming." Hearing this, Emily's cheeks flushed a delicate pink, the sunlight accentuating her youthful charm. Meanwhile, Ethan's face darkened as his gaze locked onto mine, a hint of displeasure in his expression. Carter continued jokingly, "Well, Ethan, you owe us a meal for this mix-up. It's not every day you meet a doctor. You know, having one as a friend is definitely handy." On the ride to the restaurant, Carter complained, "You've been hiding the fact you know a doctor." I had to wait forever just to get my wisdom teeth removed. The doctor I went to wasn't gentle at all. I glanced at the retreating scenery outside the car window and replied nonchalantly, "First, Ethan and I haven't seen each other in years. Second, even if I did have his contact information, you'd still need to wait your turn. That wouldn't change." Carter pouted, muttering, "Stingy." I rolled my eyes and playfully punched him, and he finally shut up. Nothing had changed in my memories. Emily was still the same patient Ethan had taken in, from her initial consultations to her hospital stay. And later, when her parents abandoned her, Ethan had taken it upon himself to step in. When his colleagues asked under what capacity he was doing so, Ethan hesitated for a long time before firmly replying, "As her brother." But in this timeline, Emily never moved into the Old Song family estate. Without me interfering, their relationship had grown closer, even more unrestrained. At the restaurant, Emily immediately leaned against Ethan as soon as he sat down. Carter raised an eyebrow, giving me a curious look that I quickly dismissed with a small shake of my head. I pulled him to sit beside me and began looking over the menu. When Ethan ordered, his choices mirrored all of my past favorites. Carter, using the menu as a shield, whispered, "Since when do you eat such bland food?" Unbothered, I replied loudly enough for everyone to hear, "My tastes have changed." To emphasize, I intentionally ordered several spicy dishes. Ethan's expression faltered slightly as he lowered his gaze to the table, a trace of melancholy in his demeanor. Back then, I had adjusted my preferences to match his love for mild flavors. But now, I no longer felt the need to accommodate anyone. I would eat whatever I wanted. The meal was far from enjoyable. Emily, it seemed, didn't have the boldness yet to provoke me openly. She limited herself to throwing sharp glances in my direction, without escalating into outright challenges. Meanwhile, Ethan busied himself either adding food to my plate or refilling my glass. By the end of the meal, it was clear he had hardly eaten anything himself. Even Carter, usually oblivious, picked up on the strange tension. When we returned to the office, Carter let out a breath of relief and teased, "So, is this college friend of yours secretly still in love with you? I mean, an ordinary classmate wouldn't be this attentive after all these years, right? He's been probing so much he might as well ask for your full home address next." He rubbed his shoulder dramatically and added, "You better be careful, or you might end up in a love scam." Then, almost as an afterthought, he muttered, "Though I feel like there's something going on between him and that sister of his." His casual remark hit me like a hammer. In just one meal, Carter had picked up on something that had taken me half a lifetime to recognize. I had spent years convincing myself that Ethan and Emily were nothing more than siblings. I had woken up countless nights in a cold sweat, scouring the internet for answers to the question, can a man and a woman truly share a pure sibling-like relationship? That question had been a constant weight on my chest, tightening like an invisible fishing line. The more I ignored it, the tighter it wrapped around me, cutting into my skin and suffocating me. After work, I didn't go home. Instead, I requested 3 days off and booked a flight back to my hometown. Before I left, a heavy rainstorm swept through the city. Carter called me as I waited at the airport. "Where are you?" he asked. Caught off guard, I hesitated. "I'm at the airport, heading home for a few days to rest." He must have been driving, as I could hear the relentless patter of rain against his car windows. "Interesting coincidence," he said. "Guess who just got into a car accident on the way to the airport? Dr. Song." "Ethan?" I blinked, trying to process his words. "He was heading out of town?" Carter paused before replying. "Not sure, but I heard the crash was pretty serious. His car flipped over completely. If someone hadn't found him in time, he might have lost an arm or a leg. Now that would have been a tragedy." I remained silent, and Carter added, "What did you just say?" I shook my head, quickly changing the subject. "Drive carefully in this rain." We exchanged only a few more words before I ended the call. Driving in heavy rain was exhausting, and the last thing anyone needed was to end up like Ethan. As I watched the torrential rain outside, my fingers tightened around my phone. In the past, I would have torn up my ticket without a second thought and rushed to his side, because nothing in my world had ever been more important than him. But now, all I cared about was whether my flight would depart on time. When the boarding announcement came, I exhaled in relief. Everything proceeded as scheduled. As the plane ascended and the sensation of weightlessness enveloped me, my mind wandered. That eerie feeling was no different from the moment before death. But this time, my medication was in my pocket, not on an unreachable shelf. The voice of the flight attendant brought me back to reality. I reminded myself, I didn't marry Ethan, and I wouldn't die. When I got home, my parents were still fixated on the topic of marriage. The only difference now was that they had lowered their expectations. As long as the person was from the same area, even someone working far away was acceptable. Since they had compromised, I didn't want to argue further. But when Carter showed up, I couldn't stop the twitch at the corner of my mouth. So, you're the one Aunt Fong described as talented, handsome, and wealthy. Carter looked just as bewildered, muttering, and you've got the nerve to talk. Fong's been singing your praises non-stop, making you sound like some heavenly being. Did you even bother looking at the photo she sent? I pulled out a photo that only showed a silhouette. Are you talking about this one? Aunt Fong had mentioned the guy was shy and didn't stay in town. This photo, secretly taken by his parents, was the only one she had. Although the angle made the perspective look distorted, it was clear he had decent height and a good build. Who would have thought it would actually be Carter? Aunt Fong said you earn $17,000 a month. Does our firm even pay that much after someone gets promoted? I teased, watching Carter rub his earlobe awkwardly for once. I said $10,000, he corrected. My parents are already bending over backward to listen to me. They agreed to lower their standards to one stable job and one decent income. That's progress. I laughed, finding the situation unexpectedly amusing. Might as well play along for the sake of a peaceful New Year's holiday. We agreed to keep the ruse going and inform Aunt Fong separately that we'd try getting to know each other better. Her delighted response came quickly, filled with praise and satisfaction. For once, both our parents stopped bombarding us with messages. By the time Carter dropped me off at home, it was already late. Don't forget to organize your files for tomorrow's meeting, he reminded me, his tone becoming all businesslike. I waved him off impatiently. Who enjoys being reminded about work on the last day of the weekend? Just as I was about to head inside, Carter hesitated, glancing at me. By the way, I heard Dr. Song was discharged recently. Want to go with me to pay him a visit? I shut the car door with a smirk. Doesn't matter what you do. Just know that when it comes to wisdom teeth, I'm not letting you cut in line. Carter slumped over the steering wheel in mock defeat, his face full of regret. The late autumn evening was bleak, the ground littered with fallen yellow leaves. I rubbed my nose, stepped into the elevator, and prepared for bed. If I'd known Carter was my blind date, I wouldn't have bothered with makeup or contact lenses. What a waste of effort. When the elevator doors opened, I lifted my gaze from my phone and froze. The door across from me opened, revealing Ethan in casual homeware. I exhaled in relief, but my guard went up instantly. What are you doing here? Ethan's gaze was filled with an unspoken sorrow as he studied me for a long moment before murmuring, I didn't think you'd come back so late. Something felt off. My instincts told me to cut the conversation short. But before I could, Ethan stepped fully out into the hallway. His apartment door shut behind him with a click. I forgot to change the fingerprint lock, he said helplessly, his voice soft. And now I don't have my key. He stood there in his lightweight loungewear, barefoot, with damp black hair dripping water onto the floor. It was obvious he'd just taken a shower. I sighed. Fine. Come in. This Ethan, as scattered as he had been back in college, was still the same. I handed him a new towel and a clean, lightweight blanket. You'll sleep here tonight. Tomorrow, I'll find a locksmith for you. By the way, why are you living here? Ethan obediently rubbed his hair with the towel, his gaze fixed on the floor. He seemed lost in thought, his usually calm demeanor replaced with uncertainty. After a long pause, he mumbled, I moved. I'm not sure why. Ethan suddenly emphasized, I sent Emily back. From now on, it'll just be me living here. I paused, surprised, and caught the hint of sadness in his expression but didn't overthink it. Maybe my earlier conversation with Carter had dulled my senses. I simply nodded. Ethan slipped on my spare slippers and headed into the bedroom. but not before remembering to lock the door. The next morning, I was awakened by the aroma of porridge wafting through the apartment. Groggy, I wandered out and saw Ethan in the kitchen, wearing my apron and busy with his back to me. "When did you learn to cook porridge?" I asked, my voice startling even myself awake. Ethan stiffened slightly, clearly startled too. In this life, I hadn't married Ethan, so whether or not he could cook wasn't something I should know about. Fortunately, he didn't seem to dwell on it and continued cooking with his back to me. "Living alone for a while. You pick things up," he replied. I pursed my lips, unimpressed. "Don't think I've forgotten how Emily brought you meals just a few days ago." Looking at the breakfast spread he'd set out on the table, my appetite suddenly vanished. To distract myself, I decided to call a locksmith for him. Ethan's expression faltered, a subtle disappointment crossing his face. "I'll stay until it's fixed," he offered. "That's not necessary. I need to get to work soon," I said, glancing away. After a moment's hesitation, I added, "Besides, I don't like having outsiders in my home." His face immediately fell, and he awkwardly removed the apron, folding it carefully. Then, with the same careful precision, he folded the blanket he had used the night before. "I'll wash it and bring it back." I finally let my irritation slip through. "There's no need. Just leave it there. It'll end up the same as breakfast, thrown in the trash." For a moment, I thought I might have imagined it, but something about Ethan felt off. He seemed tense, as if he were afraid of doing or saying anything that might upset me. But truthfully, I didn't feel angry. I simply wanted him to leave quickly, like any polite but distant social interaction. I ran my fingers through my hair just as the locksmith arrived, leaving Ethan with no excuse to linger. Dejected, he shuffled out the door. I didn't leave my apartment until I was certain he had gone. Closing my door with a heavy thud, I glanced at the door across the hall and sighed. Perhaps it was time to consider moving. The following days were a blur. Work became so overwhelming that my schedule flipped completely, and I often ended up sleeping at the office. The idea of moving slipped my mind entirely. By the time I remembered, it was already Christmas Day. That morning, Ethan knocked on my door. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my tone neutral. Ethan visibly relaxed, as if he'd been worried I wouldn't answer. "I thought you weren't home," he said, nervously rubbing the corner of his jacket. I asked, "Do you have any plans for today?" Just as the words left my mouth, Carter suddenly appeared out of nowhere, interrupting my focus. My attention scattered as I opened the door and let him in. Then, turning to Ethan, I gave him a polite smile. "Sorry, I already have plans today." Ethan's smile froze awkwardly on his face, and for a moment, even his breathing seemed to halt. Without another word, I closed the door, leaving him outside. Carter, already sprawled on my sofa, looked at me with a mix of amusement and pity. "Don't you think that was a bit harsh on Dr. Song?" "Well, if you're so concerned, why don't you spend the day with him?" I shot back, adding with a cold laugh, "He might look refined, but who knows if he's a wolf in sheep's clothing." The Christmas spirit was thick in the air as we walked through the streets, surrounded by festive decorations. Carter and I took a photo together and sent it to our respective parents. "You know," Carter mused, "if you weren't my coworker, I might have actually pursued you for real." "Why? You think coworkers aren't good enough for you?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "At least I wouldn't want to see your face at work and after hours every day." His remark made me laugh, but I couldn't find a good retort. Falling for a coworker was indeed a complicated affair. We stayed out late, enjoying the festivities, before Carter drove me home. This time, he didn't come upstairs. Instead, he nodded toward a figure standing under a nearby street lamp. "Looks like your Dr. Song is quite the hopeless romantic," he said before giving us space and leaving. I followed his gaze, and all the cheer I had built up vanished in an instant. Ethan stood motionless under the dim, flickering streetlight, still wearing the same clothes from earlier in the day. I had no idea how long he'd been waiting there. When he saw me, his face lit up briefly, but it quickly gave way to a strained smile. His voice, trembling against the cold night air, broke the silence. Are you seeing someone now? Or?" He couldn't even bring himself to say the word married. It was as if saying it would shatter the fragile composure he was clinging to. "Ethan, I thought I'd made myself clear enough," I said, meeting his gaze. For a moment, an unexpected pang shot through my chest, but I forced myself to continue. "There's no future for us. No matter what you do. It's impossible." Confusion clouded his eyes. In desperation, he reached for my hand, but I instinctively stepped back, leaving him frozen in place. His disheveled hair fell across his face, giving him a look of uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I know," he said hoarsely, his voice cracking, "but you have to give me a chance. At least let me compete with him fairly." My voice was icy as it cut through the tension. "Ethan, if I truly liked Carter, there would be no fair competition. Just like in our past life. What you did to me with Emily. Without your tacit approval, she wouldn't have been able to treat me the way she did. Every way she hurt me, you were complicit. Tonight, Ethan was completely different. He seemed like a man possessed, fixated on petty arguments and desperate for answers. It was nothing like the composed and confident doctor I had seen in the hospital. "Ethan," I said firmly, "we are impossible. I will never choose you in this life," I said. Ethan froze, disbelief written all over his face. "Is it because we never even began?" His words were confusing, but I understood. He thought that because nothing had started between us yet, he still had a chance to rewrite our story. As long as he kept Emily out of the way this time, he believed we could start over. A sharp pain throbbed at my temples. I took another step back. "Yes, exactly because nothing ever began." Ethan's expression changed. Panic crept into his voice as he rushed to explain. "It's not like that. Emily is gone now. I sent her away. She won't stand between us anymore." "And after that?" I asked, my voice dripping with mockery as his face turned red. "She's still listed on the same household registry as you, isn't she? She's still your sister, isn't she?" I bit down hard on the word sister, ensuring he understood its weight. No one wants to marry a man who has an adoptive sister like that and spend the rest of their life entangled in such a mess. I was foolish once. I won't be foolish a second time. Snow began to fall around us, soft and quiet. It was the first snow of the season. They say that watching the first snow with someone you love means you'll grow old together. But I didn't want to grow old with Ethan. I turned on my heel, heading back inside. "Oh, and Ethan, don't show up in front of me again. Consider it your penance." Ethan's body swayed as if the words physically struck him. I wasn't sure how much of what I said had actually sunk in. He had always been proud, and my blatant rejection was likely a hard pill to swallow. He thought that bowing his head and making amends would bring back the love we once had. But the truth was, our relationship had long since fallen apart, riddled with wounds that couldn't be healed. Whether Ethan had also been reborn or found a way to recover memories of our past life didn't matter. I had made up my mind. This time, I wasn't stepping back into the flames. Later, Carter told me that Ethan had removed Emily from the family registry. Emily had reverted to her original surname. But before that happened, she had threatened to sue Ethan, demanding half of their parents' estate. Although she lost the case, the ordeal had left Ethan's parents furious and emotionally drained. "I'd say Ethan is stuck with that sister of his for the rest of his life," Carter said with a gleeful smirk. He had been frequenting the courthouse lately, eager to see how the drama would unfold. But to me, all of it was just noise, like a breeze passing by and dissipating into nothing. Emily's obsession with Ethan had become pathological, rooted in her fear of abandonment. Ethan, on the other hand, had ruthlessly severed the last thread connecting them. How could Emily ever accept that? From here on, it was just one dog biting another. The snow outside grew heavier, blanketing the world in white. Meanwhile, the warmth of the air conditioning wrapped around me, mingling with the playful banter of Carter and my colleagues. For the first time in what felt like forever, I marveled at how good it felt to be alive.